I've been thinking quite a lot recently about where I've come on my videography journey. I've learned some really cool stuff along the way, I've met some amazing people, and I've been lucky to travel all over the world. Videography is a very diverse role, and you've got to be very adaptable and react to change and problem solve and think on your feet. You're put in different situations, you're working with different individuals, and I think it's important to be able to have a strong skill set so that when stuff goes wrong and you've got to adapt, that you know what you're doing and you can get yourself out of a situation when it arises. So I've come up with a few ideas that I think are really important in a videographer's arsenal. Some of them might seem quite obvious, but sometimes it's the small things that make the biggest difference with videography. Right, let's get into it. As a videographer, you need to really know your way around your camera gear, and my number one tip here is to see gear as an enabler and not as a flex. When you start out videography, you've got to choose camera brands, you've got to choose lenses, you've got to choose audio, you've got to choose tripods, lighting. There's so much things on offer. Mirrorless camera technology has come so far, and I don't think there's such a thing as a bad camera these days. It's not really about what you shoot, it's how you use it to get the shot that you need, and that's the most important thing. And that's a maturity thing as well. When you start out, you think the gear is really cool and whatever. I bought myself a Sony A7SIII, which is a small version of the A7 III. That was my first camera. Every camera model is going to have its limitations, but as far as I'm concerned, as long as you can get the shot that you need using the tool that you have, that's all that matters. So nowadays, I've got two camera bodies, I've got a load of different lenses, but I've chopped and changed and I've mixed it up over the years. When you start out, you've got all this gear and you think, wow, like this stuff's amazing, and you want to buy the latest lens and you want to buy the latest camera body and all the rest of it. After a period of time, you see it more as an enabler, so you're thinking more in shot types, you're thinking in focal lengths, you're thinking in aperture, and you're not really thinking about what it is, you're just thinking about what shots you need and then what lenses come after that. The first lens that I bought was a 35mm prime. It was an f1.4 Sigma, fantastic lens, but I was doing more video than photo at the time, so it was great for photography, fantastic, but when I was using the lens for video, it felt too heavy. I was using it on a gimbal quite a lot. It didn't work for me. In hindsight, I probably would have bought this, which is the 24-70 f2.8 G Master. This is one of the most recent lenses that I've bought. Nowadays, I film golf most of the time. The 24-70 focal length is quite ideal for that kind of sport because you need the wider shots, but also you want the sort of 70mm, more compressed shots as well. So being able to do photo and video at a range of focal lengths from 24 through to 70 is very important. I've also got a couple of primes that I use. I very much prefer the prime look for video. However, the problem with a prime lens is you have to move. You know, with a zoom lens, you can stand there and you can zoom in and out and get a different focal length and a different look. With a prime lens, you're fixed. So here I've got a 24, that's a 50. You need to pick what's working for you. Most of the scenarios that I'm in now, I need a wider angle. So, you know, I've got a 16-35 here, f4. Power zoom lens, fantastic lens, really light, nice on a gimbal. This camera here is an A7 IV. A7 IV shoots at APS-C crop mode when you're in a 50 FPS frame rate. Having a 16mm lens, 1.5 times crop, which becomes a 24, still very wide. Things like that scenario, understanding gear, understanding what you need, and the different ways that the camera is going to interpret that focal length is really important. Tip number 2, I want to talk about audio. Now, when you start out in videography, you might have a camera, you might have a lens, and I would always recommend to buy a shotgun microphone. Shotgun microphone is very important for getting ambient sound. I film a lot of sports, so hearing, you know, ball noises, hearing movement, hearing boxing punches, crowd noises. You know, it's important to have ambient sound so that when you've got an edit, you can use those and rejig those around and change your sound design up. And also, it just makes you feel like you're really in the moment. Audio is so important, and I think it's something that's massively overlooked. Some key tips that I've learned from a good friend of mine, Dan, when I started out in videography, is to always have a backup. One source of audio in this day and age is a massive, massive risk. You can forget to plug your microphone in properly. You might have that crackly noise. Lav mics, they're fantastic when they work. When they don't work, you completely ruin your audio, and if you've got no other option, you're kind of screwed. My number one rule for audio is to always run a 2 audio setup. So if you've got multiple cameras, make sure that at least one of them has got a shotgun microphone on. I also have a lav mic here. So the lav mic is my first choice, and then that's my backup. So if I have a problem with this, or it doesn't come out quite right, that is the audio source that I'll be able to use. Now it's not that great in here, it's quite echoey, so this is probably the preference. But say you're on a shoot and you've got someone important that you're never going to get again, if you don't have a backup source of audio, you're really screwed. An example of this, I was filming a table tennis video out in India, and we were in this really fancy hall, and we were running 5 or 6 different cameras, 2 mobile cameras on gimbals, and 3 different static cameras. The air conditioning in the hall was so loud that all of the shotgun microphones sounded far too loud, and you couldn't hear the people talking properly. And also, it was a table tennis match, so you wanted to hear the ball, couldn't hear it, it sounded awful. Luckily, we had personal lav mics on every player that was playing in the video, and we also had a GoPro which was on the table, which was also capturing audio. That was our last resort. So we had practically 4 different sources of audio, and luckily one of those worked for that video. If I was running a single source of audio set up there, the whole video would have been ruined. If you get anything from this video, do not disregard audio. Tip number 3, exposure is more important than composition. The way that you expose an image using your camera can really make or break the shot. The best way to make an expensive camera look cheap is to blow out your highlights. Now I expose S-Log3. The reason I shoot in log is to maximize the dynamic range so that I've got the detail in the shadows, but also I've got the highlights detail as well. Say you don't use a picture profile like S-Log3, you need to nail that exposure in the camera, because if you don't, your highlights might be blown out, your shadows might be too dark, and your colors will completely break down, which means that when you're editing in post, you're really going to not get a great image out of your camera. When you're sending that to a client, or if it's a professional product for YouTube, it's not going to look great, and it's going to make your expensive camera look pretty cheap very quickly. Using different exposure tools and ways to expose an image is really important, and it's one thing that you should learn as soon as you can. Exposing your camera properly is one of the most important skills that you should learn early on as a videographer. Framing, composition, all the rest of it, you can get creative with that and you can learn it down the line. Once you understand exposure, it allows you to get more creative. You can try different things. You can work out how manipulating your aperture has an effect to darken an image. You can work out how slowing your shutter speed down can brighten an image. These are the things that, if you do photography, you'll learn this much quicker than video. But I think as a videographer, it's almost just as important. A badly composed image or a badly framed image, you can get away with things. You can reframe, you can crop down. There's options available to you that you can get away with that. Whereas if you badly expose an image, it makes the video look absolutely diabolical, and that's the last thing you want. The next thing I want to talk about is mentoring and really asking questions. The one thing I would say when you're starting out, there's a lot to learn, but do not be afraid to ask. You'll be put in situations where you won't know what the best solution is. And if say you're on a shoot and you're there and there's other videographers there that are more experienced than you, that have been in the game a lot longer, ask them questions. Don't be afraid to reach out and say, look, I'm framing this shot in this way, or what's your exposure for this image? How are you telling the story? Have you got any ideas of how you're going to compose this image based on where we are? I went to the Philippines recently and I was filming a golf event, and there was a lot of videographers there, all doing different things. I ended up filming a course vlog, I was on a golf buggy, I had a 2-cam setup, and the guy that I was filming, Sam, he was playing a Pro-Am tournament, and I thought to myself, right, I'm on my own here, how can I film this course vlog solo without another cameraman? I've got 2 cameras with me. I also had an action camera, right? And I thought, being able to roll 2 mirrorless cameras in bright sunlight, exposing them correctly at the same time to make sure that the image looks good and tell a story is going to be very difficult. So I went for a simple approach. I went for a 1-camera setup, which was handheld my A7S III, and then I rolled with an action camera, which was on a tripod, which had auto exposure tools. This meant that I could plant that down and catch the behind the line shot, and then I could catch all the interactions and all the conversation and the chat from the other camera. Now the reason I went for this is I was there and I was chatting to another videographer that was much more experienced than me. He's a freelancer, does lots of does stuff all over the world. You know, he'd just come from Singapore, filming some stuff, had all the gear, and he's pretty clued up as well. I spoke to him before the shoot and I said, look, I got to roll this. I got 2 cameras here. I got an A7 IV and A7S3. How the hell am I going to expose both of these correctly? There's no auto ND. I got to adjust ND filters. This is going to be quite challenging. He said, look, why don't you just use an action cam? I hadn't even thought of it. I was overcomplicating it, thinking, right, I've got to run a 24 to 105 there, and I'm going to have a 50mm prime on there, and I'm going to punch it. It's too complicated. There's no point. The most important thing as a videographer is telling a story. If you don't tell a story, you might as well not bother. You know, storytelling is much, much more important than any other skill. That videographer that I was chatting to, he reminded me of that. You know, you're telling a story. The 2 camera setup worked really well and the image actually came out pretty well. Lean into the people that are around you. The person that you're working next to that's holding his camera rig, he might be where you were, you know, he might have been where you were 2 years ago. Ask for help. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be embarrassed to ask. When you're out on a shoot, you're under a lot of pressure. You've got to get the framing right. You've got to sort audio out. You've got to tell a story. You've got to sort out lighting. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and there's a lot of variables. There's a million different settings that you've got to change. Ask questions, speak to people that are around you, and lean into their experience and their knowledge. The stuff that I know now, whether that's editing, out on a shoot, having multiple sources of audio, like I spoke earlier, multiple cameras, understanding which frame rate to use for which scenario, all of that stuff you learn over time, and then it becomes second nature to you. It's like, say you're shooting an interview like this, or you know, a static thing, there's no motion. I'm going to shoot at 25 FPS all day long. If I'm filming action sports, it's double that frame rate. I'd shoot at 50 FPS, even 100 for some slow motion. But I might not need the slow motion, so I might just shoot at 50. These sort of skills and understanding, right, have I set my white balance? Have I adjust my shutter speed? What aperture am I shooting at? What's my exposure look like? All of these things, they become second nature to you after a long time. The more you do it and the more scenarios that you're put in, the better you'll get as a videographer. The final thing that I was going to talk about is finding your lane. What do I mean by that? Well, when you start out in videography, I think it's very important to do something that you're passionate about. It's not an easy job. You know, you've got to manage deadlines, you're under pressure, you've got to edit, you've got to spend hours behind a timeline, you've got to adjust things, you've got to deal with people coming at you with corrections, you've got to make up graphics, you've got to do music, you've got to do montages, sound design. There's a lot of different nuances that come under the videography umbrella. Doing something that you're passionate about and that you have an interest in, I would say, is one of the most important things when you're starting out. I played table tennis for years and I played at university. I've got some of my best friends that I've met over my life that through table tennis, that was my favourite sport. I love racket sports, but table tennis was the one that I used to play. The reason I got into this is my friend Dan has a YouTube channel called Table Tennis Daily. Be sure to check it out. I edited for Dan for a number of years, and the reason I got into videography was because of him. I was playing table tennis and I'd known Dan for a number of years. He asked me if I was interested in doing some editing for him. This was whilst I was at university in about 2019, so I started doing some video editing, and that's what I learned first, was actually editing. I didn't even pick up a camera for the first 2 years. I was just editing other people's footage. And you learn a lot from editing. You learn how people have composed a shot, you learn about exposure, you learn about sound design, you learn about storytelling. The reason I find video editing quite fun is, and it's such a creative process, is I've done it for a number of years. I've got quite a broad skill set of how to problem solve, how to create a story and get yourself around certain situations. And my old colleague Dan, I've got a lot to thank for that. He's been running the Table Tennis Daily YouTube channel for over 12 years now. He's made hundreds of different videos. A lot of them have gone viral, some of which I've helped contribute to, which has been fantastic. Finding your lane is so important when it comes to videography. And the reason I really enjoyed making content about table tennis is because I played the sport myself. I understood the nuances, I understood the game, I understood what looks good and what doesn't. You know, you understand how a pro player moves around the court. It helps with framing, it helps with creative storytelling, which meant that when I started filming the content after about 2 years of editing, I really started to understand what makes a good video in this particular industry. Understanding the ins and outs of that particular sport really helped me when I started filming table tennis. and it meant that it didn't take long for me to be able to produce very, very high level video for that particular sport. Nowadays I'm filming golf content, so I work for a golf YouTube channel. The reason I was interested in that particular sport is I used to play golf when I was a kid. I understood some of the basic nuances. Alright, I didn't play to a higher level like I did in table tennis, but it meant that when I got the job I could talk about different things such as the different types of clubs, different swings, different courses, the rules, all the rest of it. That helped me and that continues to help me on a daily basis understanding that particular sport. If you're passionate about a thing you're making content on or you're filming, then it's going to get you through those tough times, whether it's a really challenging edit or you're having problems with time pressures or you're lacking creativity. If you're doing something you're passionate about, you're going to much more likely find a solution to the problem that you have. The last thing I was going to say is, in this day and age, there's a lot of distraction and there's a lot of things on Instagram, on YouTube that may add value to you, but really you're just consuming. If you can get to a situation where you're creating more than you're consuming, you're going to carry on growing. If you're just watching other people do stuff, you're not trying new techniques and new methods of creating videos, you're not going to learn anything. You know, you might see something on Instagram, but if you don't try it, then how do you know that skill? You need to try and implement these things into your practices. I would say everyone's a victim of this. You know, you can scroll through Instagram and you can watch some awesome hype reels, there's some crazy transitions, crazy effects. If you create more than you consume, you're always going to keep learning and growing, and that's really important as a videographer. So that's all from this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you might have learned something along the way. If you have, let me know in the comments below.